And good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. Fantastic to have this opportunity with you every Friday afternoon. We're always here, we're always live. This is kind of like our team meeting for the Student Success Coach community. So, those of you that are joining us today, hopefully you got some notification from your universities. So, I know they did send that out this week, which is absolutely fantastic. And those of you that are sort of actively busy with writing assignments or final reports or just trying to get your head around academic referencing, you're going to find today absolutely incredibly useful. I grappled with academic own PhD, and I developed some tips and tricks and techniques, which I speak about and I teach in my course, which I'll provide free access to a little bit later on. But we're also going to go through some of those tips and tricks in this webinar. So you'll be able to learn something from your time with me this afternoon. And you'll be able to watch this recording on the YouTube channel at a later stage. Plus, you'll be able to go into the course. And I've got some other fantastic free giveaways just to help you be successful in your student journey. And that's really what we're all about here at the Student Success Coach community. So, hi, Wrench. Nice to have you on board. Great to have you with us. And anybody else just joining, you've made it through to Friday afternoon. The weekend is officially here, but let's just get a little bit of learning in. Hopefully, it'll be useful in whatever phase you are at in your academic journey. And that the tips and techniques that I talk about today and that you'll learn more about in the course are really useful at almost any level of academic studies. You will need to start doing referencing. Even my youngest daughter at 10, they are teaching how to reference sources on projects. So it really starts at that level. But what we'll go through today is the discipline, the academic rigor of bringing source material into your writing assignments, into your reports, and into your research. Kayleen, hello from Pretoria. Great to have you with us. Papile, hello from Johannesburg. Also fantastic to have you here. And Brian from Windhoek, Namibia. Welcome to you all the way from Namibia. Absolutely fantastic to have just such a wide group of people on the webinar this afternoon. All right, so I think let's get started. We've got a decent group joining us now, and I'm keen to get into this topic and also very keen to answer your specific questions. I mean, that's always the benefit of doing these things live, so that you can bring your specific questions. And I'd ask that you do pop those in the chat and whatever you're grappling with. Hi, Amy. Good to see you. And yeah, as I say, any questions that you've got, just pop it in the chat and we'll pick those up. And what's great is I sometimes see, people in the webinar answering each other's questions, which is absolutely fantastic. We're very much a community and very much helping each other. I certainly don't have all the answers, but fantastic that you've got access to this community. You've got access to these webinars. You've got access to the Facebook group. You've got access to just great content, great people in a safe space to help you be successful in your student journeys. All right, fantastic. Oh, look, good, fantastic group this afternoon. Really, really great to see just such interest in academic referencing. Okay, so let's get into it. And I think the first thing to say is that Nomzamo legal referencing. So I think you are talking about legal briefs and written representations into courts, etc. No, I won't be covering that. But there is an academic system of referencing and notation within the legal faculty. So if you're writing a final report or doing written assignments and you're studying law, then yes, that we won't cover it explicitly and go into detail, but we will cover related topics that will be useful for you. So I'm not too sure when you're doing your studies, not too sure if you could just clarify for there. Okay, Nomzamo, for studies. Okay, yes, no, absolutely. We'll definitely cover that, and I'll touch on that when we get to the different referencing systems, which is going to be in the first couple of slides actually. So I think really on that note, let's just anchor ourselves around this idea that academic referencing is a system. It's a structure that the academic community worldwide have agreed on that helps us all organize and refer to every piece of content that has any type of relevance in studies. And, in the course, I talk about specifically EndNote and Word and Google Scholar, and we'll go into a little bit of tips and tricks there just now. But, if you go into EndNote, you can reference an article on a web page. You can reference a YouTube video. It's almost every piece of content, has some link to it that, helps other people to find it. Now, what you should reference in your studies, we should also talk about, because you should be referencing primary, well-respected research from journals and sources that are respected in your field and in your faculty, and which, I would strongly advise, you always are in constant discussion with your supervisors and with your colleagues and co-workers and other students. And you should have a very good sense of what are the well-respected academic authors, journals, conferences, etc., that will add credibility to your research. Now, that is not to say you must just cite people because you think they will look good. If you add them into your final report, you need to critically engage with sources. And we talk about in my courses on academic referencing, on getting published or on finishing your final report, etc., how to write well and how to critique other sources. So just throwing, well respected authors and academic journals into your writing just because you think it'll make you look good, be wary of that. You need to critically engage with it. And I talk, for example, in my proposals course about how to do a proper literature review and how to demonstrate credibility and academic confidence in engaging with those sources. We're not specifically focusing on that aspects of writing today. We're focusing on the mechanics and the system of academic referencing and the tips and tricks of using tools like EndNote and Word to bring those in. What the right sources are that you need to go and bring in, I can certainly give you some advice on that. We're not going to go into too much detail on that. But assuming that you know what those are and you just need to manage them and you need to bring them into your writing and you need to make sure that you have simple and efficient processes so that referencing doesn't take you lots of time and it isn't something that drags you down and holds you back from getting finished, we definitely will cover that in this webinar, and which I go through in the course in some detail. All right, great to have Angel on board, and yeah, lots of you guys, fantastic. So questions, please guys, pop the questions into the chat. So in this academic referencing system, you firstly need to understand the system, and then you need to know how to use it. And I think this is really important because referencing, as I say, can be a little bit of a grudge, and it can hold you back, and it can be something that you leave until the last minute, and then you sit late at night struggling to manage all of your sources and bring them into your writing. If you go into your studies or you go into your writing projects understanding that it's a system, then and that you need to set up your processes as a writer, as a researcher, to be efficient in using that system, then I think that's the right mindset to have. And I go into that in the first sort of introductory video of the course, and then I talk a little bit more about the different standards that you get for that referencing system in the different faculties. Now, what this means is that when you're studying within one of these faculties, there is a format for how you cite and reference sources. Okay, so if you're in English, literature, foreign language, etc., the ones on the top there, you'll use the MLA. If you're in psychology, education, nursing, etc., APA. History, fine arts, philosophy, Chicago. Engineering, you'll use IEEE. And those are 5 broad groupings, but there are literally hundreds of very much more specific variations of each of those. But broadly speaking, you will be working in one of those, and you need to be familiar with the fact that there are 5 major groupings, and you'll need to understand it from that perspective. And in fact, if somebody can just comment which one legal would be part of. That would be how I wouldn't want to get it wrong, because I haven't spent a lot of time in that area. But which one of those, legal would be used? That'd be great. Okay, Moretla, let's deal with this. Write first and reference later. So off the bat, for your formal writing projects and assignments, and especially if you're writing a final report for a master's or a PhD, which is likely to be a lengthy document, my advice to you would be to get into the habit of citing as you write. Okay, now what does that mean? And I say the more formal stuff because obviously if you're doing what we call generational writing, or you're just writing discussion documents, etc., those are generally more informal and generally shorter documents that it's not going to be too much difficulty for you to go back afterwards and fix up your referencing. Having said that, those earlier writing projects are good practice for final reports and assignments, at later stages in your degree. So I would advise that, like I teach in this course and like I'd like to really communicate with you guys this afternoon, academic referencing is a system, and so too bringing referencing and doing it properly in your writing should become a habit. So get into the habit of writing with referencing in mind. And regardless of the format and the notation, if you're in the academic world and you see that picture of the library there, you're interested in increasing humanities knowledge. You're researching to solve a problem on a certain topic with a certain thesis statement. And I teach a lot about that in my proposals courses, how to set that topic up and defend a thesis statement. But you have a passion for an area or a topic in a certain faculty, and you want to grow knowledge. Now, before you can increase humanities knowledge, and it's a fantastic opportunity that we all have, and don't underestimate the importance of doing that. I fundamentally believe that traditional rigorous research still holds the key to solving humanity's greatest problems. Okay, otherwise everything else is just experimental and fake news. Good, disciplined academic rigor, is what we've relied on for the progress of humanity. And if you want to play a role in that, you first have to understand how existing knowledge is managed and organized, and that's the referencing system. And to be a good researcher, that has to become part and parcel of how you approach everything that you do in your research. Every aspect of doing the study, gathering the data, analyzing the data, doing your writing, etc. You've always got to be thinking about, and unfortunately, of course, we're more at home these days and studying from home. On most campuses, you'll have libraries for each of the different faculties, and you'll often be studying in libraries. And I often used to go and spend time in a library doing writing, not looking for references necessarily, but just remembering that I'm in a library because I'm operating in a world where there is existing knowledge that's supported by good disciplined academic research, and I have a role to play in doing research in a proper way to contribute that. So Moretla, long story to come back to your question. If you learn to cite as you write, and if you have a source library like EndNote and you plug that into Word, then the time it takes for you to cite as you write will be drastically diminished. And that's why very often we do actually reference later. So we think, okay, I'm just going to get this writing done, and then I'll go back and work out, where I reference different sources and how I bring them in, etc. So I would highly recommend that you try not to do that. Obviously, we always have deadlines, and sometimes it's not always perfect. But when you're writing, and I have a whole course that we do lots of webinars on writing, and you think of a reference or a source that you want to bring in that's critical to your argument or the point that you're making, try and do it in the flow of constructing your sentence and your paragraph, right? Even if you just make a note of it and you highlight that document or that journal or that conference that you want to bring in, and you leave that to later and you bring that in, that's at least making a note of the citation that you want to do at the time. The best approach, as I teach in this course, is to load and EndNote. That's great, but the other referencing systems and source libraries will have probably similar features. In Microsoft Word, you will create a little button, and you'll be able to click that button and you'll be able to search your source library for the author or the journal or conference that you're interested in bringing in. Click on it, and Word will automatically drop that citation into your paragraph, your sentences. Now, when you set up your reference library, you need to define which of these formats you're using, because when you cite in your paragraph or your sentence, it will use that format. That's the first thing it'll do. The second thing, it will add an entry into your reference section at the end of your document. Okay, so and we'll look at a couple of those examples. For example, in humanities, it'll put the author and then the year and then maybe one or two other fields. Now, very importantly, every piece of content out there, like we were saying, that we use the referencing system to access, and I'm talking about the formal academic content now, let's just stick with that for this webinar, will more or less have the same fields associated with that piece of data. Okay. If it's a journal article or a conference proceedings or someone else's final report that's available through a university database, you know, author, year, title, etc. Those fields are the same, right? Regardless. But the format that you use for the faculty that you're working in defines what the fields are that are included when you cite as you write, and what the format is of the entry into the list of references at the end of your document. Okay, now what's beautiful about doing it in an automated way like I teach in the course is that you can then go and click one button and it will automatically change that notation and that format if you maybe for whatever reason did the wrong referencing notation and have to switch to another one, for example, or you write for a different journal or go to a different conference using the same content, etc. If you do that manually, it's going to take you ages and ages and ages. And I'm talking about manually both in terms of managing your sources, right? So let's say you go find a source, it's a PDF document. Okay. Now, where I started in my academic journey was I would just create a folder on my PC and I had a list of all those PDFs in there, and I just kind of put the title in the file name so I could go back and pick that out. You cannot do that. Definitely not for a PhD. And I would say almost for a master's, it's going to cost you hours and hours and hours and hours, because you're hard coding everything in. If you use EndNote and a proper plugin to Word, it automates all of that for you. And the course, so that's the mindset, that's the approach, that's just answering Moretla's question here. And the course of what I want to talk about today is just the usage of those tools to achieve that level of automation, but recognizing it will take a little bit of investment in time and possibly money up front to set that up so that you can then get efficient and quick at using that system at a later stage. And I went through this in my PhD. I started off and I was very clumsy and clunky and thought I would save time. But actually, I started using more time than it was necessary. So I figured it out for me and I got it right and I created a course, and I want you guys to have the same benefit, because who wants to sit formatting references in a Word document at 2 o'clock in the morning? That you do not want to waste your time on that. You want to spend your time on your research and properly critically engaging with your references and the content of those references. The notation and the formatting, that's just acknowledging the system that we're working in, but let the tools do the hard work for you. Okay, Siski, good afternoon. MSc student from University of Pretoria. Hope to learn a lot from this platform about referencing and how to avoid mistakes in projects. Okay, so Siski, hopefully you got that little sort of tee up there, that intro to this topic that I was talking about just now, and hopefully you take that advice on board. And look, universities should provide some form of free access to a referencing or source library, like maybe Zotero or others. And so the principles that I teach are going to be the same here around automating that process of citing as you write. But again, the course is more specific to EndNote, and my experience of these types of tools is very much more from an EndNote and a Word perspective. Okay, more questions, please, guys. Let's get the conversation going. Okay, so let's talk about tools then. And these are the 3 tools that I teach in the course and that we'll touch on in this webinar. So at the core of it is EndNote. Now, EndNote is a system that you can buy a license for. And unfortunately, certain at WITS, I don't think they've made student free licenses available yet, which I think I think they should be doing that. But if you've got it, you bought it, whatever the case may be, I had to buy it. I do not regret 1 cent of what I spent on it, because it saved me hours and hours and hours, and ultimately time is money. And who wants to, spend money on a degree, getting a degree, and then you don't get it because you just weren't organized around your references, etc. And to be honest with you, you will fail. Examiners will fail you if your referencing is not up to scratch. It's one of those things that they just will not compromise on. So EndNote is the system where you load all your references in. So let's say you find a PDF, and when you are navigating around the academic databases, I don't want you to stress too much about how those academic databases talk about, citations and referencing and all the rest of it on that system. I'm going to teach you a trick from Google Scholar that bypasses all of that stuff. All that you need from those academic databases is the PDF, okay, the source document. Now, instead of just loading that onto your PC and leaving it in a folder, I want you to get it into EndNote, right? And once you've got it in EndNote, you will then tell EndNote the fields about that document. Now, EndNote is meant to be able to pick it up from the PDF. It depends on whether that PDF has been created in a way that EndNote can read it. And I didn't have very much success with that. What I had success with was my Google Scholar hack, which I will teach you just now. And the Google Scholar hack is that the metadata. So remember what we said, you've got your PDF is your content that you want to talk about in your writing. You put that in EndNote, and then you have to load the metadata. Now, by all means, you can go and type that in. Again, that's taking time. Rather let the tools work for you. And I used Google Scholar to do that. Okay, so what have we spoken about so far? EndNote is your database of PDFs and sources. You need to load the metadata about each of those, or EndNote can pick it up automatically, either from the PDF itself, or EndNote has access into those academic databases and it can go look for it itself and bring it in. I also couldn't get that integration right, and I'm reasonably technical, so I also wouldn't waste too much time on that. I would use the hack that I give you in this webinar and that I go into more detail in the course. Okay, then you've got Word. And Word is obviously, like we were talking about just now, where you're doing your writing and you have to then create a little plugin. And it's not too difficult. I show you in the course, but you create a plugin, and in Word, you will see on the menu, just where you do all your other formatting, you'll see an EndNote little button. And if you're in the discipline, like I said with Moretla just now, if you're in the habit and the discipline of citing as you write and thinking about sources and referencing as you write, then you just click that button when you want to include a source. You can actually search in your source library from that button. You don't go into EndNote. You stay in Microsoft Word, and you click a button, and it inserts the citation in your paragraph, and it adds that item to your reference table at the end. Okay. Laja says EndNote allows you to use Pulp. You can add it. There's a tutorial video on the UP library on how to add Pulp. Okay, great. So go and look at these tutorials. Go and look on your university websites. Your universities need to be providing you with these tools, and ask librarians and ask people for help as you go. And today, hopefully, we'll just give you the confidence and the ideas and the tips and tricks, for you to make decisions about what tools you use and how you use them. Okay, Moretla, let's talk about what's your view on referencing from websites. Sometimes there isn't an authored reference. Okay, good point. So, I mean, in my PhD, I referenced a couple of blog articles, but the context of referencing that type of material is one in which you must acknowledge that it is secondary research. Okay. So if you're referencing a news article or somebody's blog, that is secondary research. Wikipedia is secondary research. And the context of your paragraph and your thought process when you cite that article or that website must acknowledge that. You will be penalized for citing that if your context assumes that it is primary research, or if it adds more to your research than it does. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with bringing a blog article in, or YouTube or website, whatever the case be. That's absolutely fine, but it's secondary. It can be very useful for the reader to get the extra context of that secondary research, but don't rely on it as much as you would primary research, where the author of the study and the work that was done to do the research generated and gathered and analyzed the data by them in their work. That's called primary research. When the person writing and doing the research actually gathers the data themselves. If somebody else has written about that study, i.e. on a blog, that thing is secondary research. Wikipedia is secondary research. On a Wikipedia article, you'll find a list of references at the bottom. So my advice to you was, use Wikipedia to understand broadly a topic, but then go and look at the references at the bottom of the Wikipedia article and go to the primary research. Go and find where they got their information from. You'll have to do a little bit more legwork, but that's why I say we're in the role of rigorous academic research. We're not in the realm of recycling articles and blogs and all the rest of it. So Moretla, hopefully that was useful for you. Use Wikipedia and websites with a healthy dose of caution. I would say you have to have 80% primary research references in your study, but by all means you can also refer or reference secondary research as well. Okay, so fantastic. Good to see you guys helping each other out there. And as we share every week, we have the Student Success Coach Facebook group, and I'm going to pop that link into the chat now. And those of you that are not already members of the Facebook group, you can go and join us there. And we continue these conversations in the Facebook group. So people post questions about referencing, about any aspects that we've covered on any of these interviews. So hop into the Facebook group there, and Nomzama and Larja and Moretla, you guys can actually continue that conversation and help each other there. If you're from Pretoria, give links to the university websites and all the rest of it. We have a very active, vibrant Facebook community where we can continue those conversations there. So help each other. People with tips and tricks, please feel free to post in that group. I don't, obviously I do moderate it, and we want student success relevant topic. But if you've got a tip or a trick or a video or a website, please stick it in there as well. Okay, Rensha asks a very interesting question. Do you have to reference images as well? Now, certain methodologies actually include the analysis of images. So like narrative methodologies and a couple of your qualitative methodologies, etc. And typically this is where you'll use a qualitative research tool like Atlas TI or NVivo or something like that. Okay. And very good question. The image itself will never have all the metadata of a academic source. Okay. The image will always be part of something else, I'm pretty sure. Okay. So when you cite a source that has an image in it, which is relevant to your research, this is where you will add in extra fields to your citation. So you might say, this journal article, 1999, author, etc., and then you'll say, page 9, okay, and the image will be on page 9, for example. Okay. How to answer you for images that are not part of an academic source. They may be part of a website, for example. Remember that if it's data, it doesn't have to be referenced, right? Because data is what you're analyzing, okay? And some people do provide some forms of their data in their appendices because you've generated that data. It doesn't yet have the metadata that you can reference to it. So, Wrench, I'm not too sure exactly what you're talking about, whether the image is part of your data set or whether it's part of something that you want to refer to in, let's say, your literature review or that has relevance to your research topic. But hopefully I answered your question there, that if it is in the academic context, then it'll be on a page or in some position in that source that you can then make a note of in your reference. Now, just maybe on that point, when you click that button and you go in and you edit, it creates a little field that's editable with a little EndNote pop-up, and you can go in there and you can add page numbers or you can add other bits of information, and it will put it in there in the format of that faculty's referencing system, right? So whichever one you're using, the page number will show in the format of the referencing system that you're using. You just have to put the information in that little pop-up window. Hopefully that's useful. Large has got a question. Wouldn't use of software like EndNote affect us negatively on how to cite and acknowledge sources, where in the future we would want to be a research thesis supervisor? I'm not sure how it would affect you negatively. Maybe you can just expand on that question. If you want to be a research or thesis supervisor in the future, you will most definitely have to be actively using some type of source library. I don't think that it matters which one. The only issue will be if you need to share referencing information, and I've done that quite successfully. All of the libraries do talk to each other, so because they're all using the same academic referencing system, the standardization around our sources means you can use any tool that you want. You'll just need to make a decision about if you need to pay for it, how long you want to use it, and whether you've got access to the training and the tools that helps you become a better user of it. If in your faculty and in the department or wherever it is that you want to go and work, they're all using a certain type of tool and they share knowledge and insights about how to use that tool, then definitely I would say rather use that tool, because it'll just help you be a better research supervisor if people around you are using the same tool. But in terms of collaboration internationally or with other universities or other students, etc., it honestly shouldn't really matter too much, because the format of the export out of EndNote and into any other source library is generally quite standard. So hopefully that answered your question there. For example, being able to deliver students not referencing their work properly, can we be able to pick that up? No, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, because what you will be interested in is the standard that of the faculty that you are using. Now, any reference library that you go into, that's a decent one, it'll have all of these preloaded in there. So the tool doesn't matter. The standard matters, and the student's usage of the tool to have the desired standard of it. What that means is that we don't actually have to learn the standard necessarily. You just have to learn what it should look like. And that's what you're examining. That's what you need to be able to pick up. And often I would say, when you then talk to a student that's struggling with referencing, they're maybe not automating their process, or they're not using the tools properly, or they just haven't read the material from your faculty about what referencing system you should be using. Like Chicago, I mean, it's got 50 different versions of the Chicago one. IEEE's got a number of different, and in EndNote, there's a drop-down box. You just scroll down, click the one, and then your whole document is in that format. So hopefully that's going to help you there. Okay, right. Let's move on. So this is just to reinforce then what I was talking about just now. And this is IEEE. So this is from my PhD final report. And in the course, I actually have my report is in there attached. You can go and have a look at it. It's all IEEE. It's all it's an engineering PhD. But the principles, again, what I want to just sort of communicate here is that on the left, you have a paragraph from my final report. And on the right-hand side, you have a section of my reference list, okay, at the end of the document. And message I want to give you is that the cite as you write process that you use, and why I've advised you not to do it manually, is what you see on the left-hand side in my paragraph there. And the IEEE standard is a number, just a number that appears in the paragraph. And the number refers to the reference, the list of references at the end. So when I talk about the other studies, 44 to 49, I list those 5 or 6 sources, and somebody needing that work or wanting more information about those studies would have to go page through to the end reference list and go and find numbers 44 to 49 to see what I'm talking about. In humanities, right, you will actually see the author and the year. author year, author year, author year. And I mean, just logically, the reason there is that humanities is very much more interested in human beings, the authors. So they put the name there. Engineers tend to be a little bit, let's say, more technical, less interested in the author and more interested in the result, the content, the findings. I'm not saying humanities isn't, but there's just a slightly different emphasis. And medicine is going to look different to legal, is going to look different to architecture, is going to look different to any of these other faculties. So you open a journal or a final report in any different faculty, the fundamental difference is in the paragraph where you see the notation for finding the other source that the person is talking about, and then in that list of references at the end, how it is described. So in IEEE, you can see their surname, first letter, title, year, okay? Or for 58, for example, there, the conference and the publisher, okay? But the beauty of it is, as long as I'd loaded my metadata in correctly for all my references, and remember, this is the investment up front, right? So as long as when I loaded those references into EndNote, I made sure that the metadata was correct. That was the only time I ever had to worry about it. When I'm writing, tick, tack, tick, tack, tick, tack, trying to get that paragraph out, sitting in the middle of the night, chasing a deadline, whatever the case may be, and I think, oh, I must reference those other studies. And I know in the back of my mind, and I'll teach you a trick just now about how to think about references that you want to bring into your studies. And I know there was those 5 or 6 studies that are relevant to this. All I had to do was go and click, search that author. Okay, that was the one. Bing, search author, bing, that one. And then because it's multiple, it just lists it like that, 40, 40, 49, or 51 and 53, for example, because it alphabetizes or lists those in a certain sequence. Again, the humanities one, I think, alphabetizes it. Engineering one, I think, does it by year. I'm not too sure. It applies all the rules. If I had to then go and page through my PDFs and my folders and then go and extract the year and think about, just putting in that brackets of those 6 references there would have taken me half an hour. And and remember this, when you add a reference earlier on in the document, in engineering, it'll push all the other references out by another number. So you can see there, as you're working through an IEEE formatted final report for references, the first reference will be 1, then the next reference will be 2 as you work your way through the document. If you refer to that same reference again, it's 2 again. But if I add another reference in earlier on, I have to go and renumber every single time I've cited that reference anywhere else in the document. Whereas because I just click the button in EndNote, it does that all automatically for me. So in the course, I give you a screen demonstration and I go through my final report and I show you and I talk about these things in more detail and I include the reference section at the end and go through it in some detail. So that's really just what I wanted to show you there. Now, this is then just a little bit more detail, which shows you, like I've been talking about just now, the sort of pop-up window that you get inside Word when you want to cite from your EndNote source library. So I've been writing, tick, 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 and I think of those other studies, and I click my EndNote button, and then up it pops. This is what you will see, okay? And I type in at the top there, and you must have some idea of some information about the source that you want to cite, and typically it's going to be the author, and I've actually got some of my publications there. So I type in Alchema, and it lists all the sources that I've got in my EndNote library. Remember, and you have to invest the time to load your EndNote library or your source library on whatever system you're using. You have to do that, right? I mean, and you'll quickly pick it up if the wrong information is coming through, because when you look at it in your reference list, you'll see that it's wrong, or your supervisor will pick it out. Stephen's got a question here. Does it make a difference to reference an archival source using EndNote rather than doing it manually? Again, what details are included in citing in-text archival sources? Okay, Stephen, I want you to hold that thought, because my Google Scholar hack, I'm 90% certain will solve that, because I think I know where you're coming from. So let's just hold that thought. We'll come back to a question. I'll keep the question up here on the screen. Okay, so this is just showing you the EndNote plugin inside Word. Okay, and this is a live or a recorded interactive demo in the course that you can go through for more information, but it's just showing you the EndNote window that pops up inside Microsoft Word. And now, because I've searched on an author, I can scroll down through all the sources that I have for that author, and I can click whichever one I want to use. I get a preview of the metadata. So for any source that's highlighted there, it shows me at the bottom the metadata that's already loaded in the library. When I click that, it will cite it for IEEE as a reference number, and it'll reorder and renumber all the other numbers for me, and it'll add that source that I've selected into the reference. So if you see, if I just take Stephen's comment away there, you'll see I've split my screen. I'm writing in the main part of the document. I'm viewing my reference library in the bottom. Click it, boom, and it pops up as a citation in the paragraph and as an extra reference in the referencing section. Saved me hours and hours and hours and hours and days and days and days of time. Let's have a look at this question. What could be the issue when you happen to find that there's an incomplete reference? Could it be that the used software may have not picked it up, or the site reference we're exporting? Okay, yes, absolutely. So again, let's talk about Google Scholar just now. But when you find an incomplete reference, that's because you have incomplete metadata. Now, this is very important actually, because you don't actually have to have the PDF document in your source library to be able to cite it. Okay? You can cite the metadata of the source, right? But you have to have the PDF document to know what's in it. Okay? As a researcher, you have to have read it. You have to have scanned it. And I talk about, engaging with sources in another course. But technically, to cite it and reference it in your document, you just need the metadata. And when your metadata is incomplete, which is what your question is talking about, that could be because the export or the import was incomplete, or whatever happened when you were loading that reference into your EndNote library didn't pick up all the metadata. And again, let's come back to Google Scholar. I'll show you how to sort that out just now. And in EndNote, where you see that there is something incomplete, or a supervisor picks it out, or an examiner picks it out, and you've got to go back and fix it up, you must then just go back into your EndNote library, click on that reference, and I do show this in the course, and then for that reference, you'll see the metadata and you'll be able to edit it and fix it. But again, the more you do manually, the more you introduce the opportunity for errors, okay, and extra work that you had to do. Okay, so good. I think we've covered a lot of those topics. Let's just see then what's next. Okay, now this is the view of EndNote. So now again, this is in EndNote, not in Word, where you're writing your document. This is in EndNote, where you're managing your references. And if you look on the left-hand side there, you'll see that little attachment icon there. That's where I have the PDF attached to the record of the source. Okay, and me engaging with the content of that source is obviously part of my research. I need to go and read it, and is it useful? Is it relevant? What do they say on page 6, or what is the image on page 20? Whatever. I need to know what's in that thing. But that's separate to the metadata, and you can see the view that I always use in EndNote is both of those. So the bottom left is the metadata. That's the only information that goes into your document. The content of the document is what you can view in EndNote if you've attached it to the record there. But that may not be the case always. You may have the PDF somewhere else. Look, obviously it's convenient to attach it in there. But for whatever reason, you may not have the PDF. You may just know that you need to reference that for another reason without having access to the content, for example. And that's fine. You can go in and create a record in EndNote. And even what I show you now with Google Scholar will create the metadata record. And very often what I would do with Google Scholar was to go and create it from Google Scholar and then actually attach the PDF to the record of the reference that I'd created from Google Scholar. So I actually did it the other way around. And I think we always have this mindset that we load the PDF and then it automatically brings the information in. I actually came the other direction. I always used to go Google Scholar, create the record in EndNote, and then attach the PDF. And often I would have two records in EndNote. I would have the one that I created with my Google Scholar hack, and then I would have imported the PDF. and then I just need to attach the PDF to the record that has the right metadata that I want to use where I'm citing. On the left, you'll see a whole bunch of folder structure that I had set up in EndNote, but that didn't really help me cite any better. And you can use it. It's just a way of grouping references. You can set up smart folders and it'll automatically pick up all references with a certain rule or a certain author or whatever rule set it is that you create. Or let's say you're working on multiple projects at the same time. You're collaborating on a journal article and you're doing a final report. You may want to organize your references using those folders on the left-hand side there. But for the discipline and the accuracy of academic referencing, it's pretty much irrelevant. Just a EndNote version of the folders that you'd have on your hard drive. And many of you on this call may have even better experience of using that folder structure in EndNote. But my advice to you would be, if you're just getting to a minimum level of competency around referencing, don't waste too much time on that folder structure on the left. You might use that when at more sort of advanced levels, doing more sort of projects in parallel. Okay, I want to, we've covered a lot. I want to just get through now Google Scholar Story. What I'm showing you here is my little hack for how to, so let's say you've got thousands of references in your library, okay? And in a typical PhD, I get asked this a lot, how many references should you have? It's not going to be all of them, but it's not going to be 10 or 20. It's going to be maybe 200, 300, 400. I have a YouTube video where I talk about my actual numbers and what could be a useful benchmark for you. But regardless of the number of them, with the system or the little hack that I used in EndNote is to rate the sources. So you get a little 5-star rating, which I hope you guys use for my courses. If you do any of my courses, please rate and review my courses and give it whatever stars you think it's worth. But the same thing applies in EndNote. And the system that I always used was that if it was a reference that I definitely thought would be in my final report, I gave it 5 stars. And I could then sort on my rating column, and I could actually go back and double check that I'd included all of those, because when you're doing a literature review, you come across all these great things and everything. How are you going to remember that you want to include that in your final report? This referencing system or this rating system is going to be your best bet to do that. And then let's say you give it 4 stars, where you think it's very good. You're not convinced it should go in your final report. And then maybe 3 stars. Yeah, you'll have a look at it later. And then 1 and 2 stars you could use for lower levels of importance of those references. Because remember, let's say you've loaded 1,000 documents in there. Other than your memory of the author, the year, the conference, the journal, etc., you're going to struggle when you're writing your paragraphs to remember what's the good stuff to bring in. So use that 5-star rating, and you can quickly get access to the top ones. And also, it's just something to go back to compare and remember. When you've done now your analysis and you're writing up your final report, you have to go back into that mode that you were in doing your literature review when you were spending more time with your sources. And that 5-star rating is quite useful just to float the most relevant references up to the very top of the list. Okay, now I want to teach you guys the Google Scholar hack. And I show you this in the course, right? But here we go. And I want to come back to the archival question that we had earlier. So Stephen asked about using an archival source. Now, the answer to your question is simply this. Is it likely that Google has referenced it? Because remember, you've got all these academic databases, and not everything is in any one academic database, okay? And remember that Google is only as good as its algorithms of searching databases that it has access to. Now, Google won't always have access to the free text, which is the PDF, because some of those are on subscription and hidden behind a paywall, which you will have access through your student login. But Google, given the power that it has, which we all know about, will almost always have access to the metadata. Hear me? And the metadata is what you need to include in your writing, in your citation and your reference list. The metadata, not the PDF, not the free text. The PDF you still need to have access to do your work, to do your research. But if you click that little button there, when you search on Google Scholar for whatever it is that you're looking for, let's say it's your archival document or reference, whatever it is. And go and test it out this afternoon, Stephen. Go and see if whatever it is that you want to reference hasn't somehow been indexed by the almighty Google algorithm. I'd love to. I've never found anything that I was looking for that I couldn't find through Google, whether it's a book or a movie or an academic reference source. So in Google Scholar, you go type in what you want there. If you've got those little quotation marks there, it's got the metadata. You click that little document, that little icon there under the reference, and up pops this little window there called cite. Now remember the 5 categories that I showed you on an earlier slide? Those are the 5 there: MLA, APA, Chicago, whatever. And you see at the bottom of that little window there, it's got BebTeX, EndNote, RefMan, and RefWorks. Now those are other source libraries. I don't know about ones that are not listed there, but if you click the EndNote button, when you've clicked on those quotation marks for the source that you're interested in referencing, it'll drop a file into your downloads tray. When you click that little icon, EndNote will open up, and that metadata will create the record of that reference in your EndNote library. That's all you have to do. Then you can go and attach the PDF to that record in EndNote. When I figured out that hack, okay, saved me hours and hours and hours and hours, because Google is not a research database, okay, but it is a very powerful indexing search engine. But you're only going to use it for that. You're only going to use it for the metadata, and you only need the metadata for your search. You shouldn't be using Google to do your research. You shouldn't be typing in your research questions into Google. Okay, we know that that's a dangerous path, because what it's going to do, it's going to give you the secondary research of Wikipedia and articles and the rest of it. You must go and do your primary research in the academic databases. And that's how you know what you're looking for. So when you find what you're looking for, very often when you go to Google Scholar, you already know what you're looking for. You know, I'm looking for Alchema's paper on CodeFest in 1999. And that's enough to triangulate the search engine onto that reference. And what you want from Google is that Google has done the hard work to organize the metadata of that reference. You click it, you pull it into EndNote, it's created that record for you, and then you add the PDF. I cannot emphasize to you guys how important that is and how many hours you're going to save if you use that method. I'm begging you to please go and try it. And yes, I'm fairly certain that the others it will apply, because remember, that metadata is again in the standard format. So you can then export or get access to that metadata as a text file and then bring that into Mendeley. So into Yabagarai, Lionel, go and have a look and see if that applies to Mendeley. I did qualify by saying it's the 4 that are listed, as I showed you on Google Scholar. But you can go and play around with Mendeley. Go and have some fun. Moretla are absolutely recording the session, and all these sessions are always available on this YouTube channel. And I would like you guys to all go and give me a sub and like any of my videos, because hopefully these are useful for you, that give you lots of a benefit. And what I'd also like to do is offer you my Student Success Amazon ebook for free, as well as a free 6-step guide to student success at the links which I've put into the chat now. Okay, very quickly, just to wrap up, we've got sort of 5-6 minutes left. A couple of topics that I still want to get through with you guys. The first one is just, again, Google Scholar in general. And as an academic researcher, very good idea just to maintain your Google Scholar profile. Now, yes, there is ResearchGate and there is academia.edu. And in my course on publishing academically, I go into a lot more detail on that. But just while we're on the topic of Google Scholar, it is also very powerful to go and pull up all your academically published work. And I mean, I even wrote a book on woodworking many years ago, and it even brought it in here. I took it off because it's not relevant to Google Scholar, but that's the power of the indexing and the access that it has to all the work. And then you can go and set up your co-authors, and then I set up a Google alert to tell me whenever a work of mine has been cited. So you can see there in that column where it says cited by. Obviously, as a researcher, if you're going on in academia, you want to be cited because that gives you credibility as a researcher. When other people start citing your work, remember what we said at the beginning. It's an academic referencing system. If you've now created knowledge by adding something into that academic system of knowledge, then other people now have access to that. And when they pull that metadata of your work into their work, the power of Google and academia.edu and ResearchGate and lots of other engines can see that metadata in that other content. They index it and they hold it as an academic reference or citation that will show up on your Google Scholar profile. So you can see here that little graph on the right-hand side for me is the number of times that I've been cited, and I set up a Google alert. Every time somebody cites me, I get an email in my inbox from Google saying, you've been cited. And that's awesome because it just reminds me that my work is still being read and I'm still making a contribution. Because what do we want to do as researchers? We want to make a contribution. How do we know we're making a contribution? When other people are referencing and including and engaging with our work. And how do we know that's happening? They're citing it. And why is citation important? Because we all know then who's looking at our work and who's referencing which work and whose work is being referenced the most and therefore has the most credibility, etc. That's the power and the importance of the academic referencing system. And I talk about ResearchGate as well in a little bit more detail in the course. Okay, so here is the course. And I'm going to just put the link for free access into the chat. And those of you that have been to my webinars before, my simple request is for you to please rate and review the course. You've got free access there, but my success and future as an instructor relies on the social proof of my courses. So just be honest and objective and detailed in your rating and review, which will help other students, looking for referencing courses on Udemy or even in Google. Google will index into Udemy. They'll be able to see your reviews and you will help them decide if that's a useful course for them for their requirements. So I do urge you to please help me. That's the only contribution. That's the only thing that I ask back from you all in return is that you leave a review and a rating. And here's some of the other reviews that I've had on the course. Excellent delivery, another tool in the bag for academic writing. Very insightful course. Everything I need to know about referencing. Just what I was looking for. Okay, so again, it is quite tool specific, but you've got free access there. You're not going to lose anything other than an hour or two going through it, and you can figure out if it applies to Mendeley. And I may in future add lessons to that course, bringing those other tools in. Okay, and then just to give you a little bit of insight into what you're going to get. There's an introduction to academic referencing, principles and practices of academic referencing, understand the basics of different referencing styles. So we spoke about that quite extensively in the webinar. And then the last section is practical demonstrations with EndNote, Word, Google Scholar, and LaTeX. So I talk about LaTeX. You may have spotted that icon earlier on in the webinar. LaTeX is a very different way of writing academically, and I've used it for a couple of papers, and it actually takes care of all the formatting as well. So Word is a word processing tool called What You See Is What You Get. As you're writing on Word, it is already formatting it in the layout of which you will print it or present it or share it, etc. And often the formatting of Word can be very laborious and frustrating. LaTeX takes all of that out, and you just focus on literally the word, the content, and it'll take care of the formatting, the referencing, and all the rest of it. But of course, because it's a very different user interface, the referencing is also very different. But I do touch on that very briefly in the course if you're interested in learning more about LaTeX, or perhaps you're even wanting to look at that in future. Okay, then also I have a mailing list, so you can sign up there and you will get promotional offers and information from me about future courses and webinars. So please do give me your email address there. And then the other thing I'd like you guys to do is just to check out the Student Success Coach website. that is up and running, and there's lots of great content on there. So I'll show you what you can get access to there. So let's just do that for you very quickly. So I'm going to call that up and show you that very quickly. So on the website, which I'm showing now, you'll be able to get lots of information about the Student Success Coach community, the podcast, the mailing list, of course, lots of other information. Then you can go and access student-related courses on writing, planning, referencing. That's this course, publishing, thesis, masterclass, procrastination even. And then even if you're looking at career tracks, I teach on a range of courses as careers, and then success in the workplace, so time management, career growth, presentations, communication, motivation, leadership, learning, etc. So there's some of the featured online courses that you can get access to. You can go and view all the courses from there. You've got access to coaching community and the podcast, the YouTube channel, and then you can see what other users have said about my courses. Go and have a squiz at all of those. And then down the bottom, you'll get access to the blog and previous webinars. So I think one of the questions was whether this will be recorded. Yes, absolutely it will. So it'll pop up on this on my website at some point, but it will also be put into a little Facebook post that I will add later on. So very importantly, if you join the Facebook group, then I do also actively post in there the resources from the webinars as well. Okay, so I don't know if there's any last questions there. Stephen, absolute pleasure for the discussion, and I hope that it's been useful. Please, guys, take action. Go join us in the Facebook group. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go enroll in the course and learn about academic referencing and get the benefits of a lot more detail and demonstrations in terms of what we've spoken about this afternoon. And when you come into the course, please do introduce yourself. There's an opportunity for you to do that. You can download my final report. You can get access to a lot of worksheets and downloadable material, and obviously all the lessons. You just need to enroll within 3 days, and then you'll have access to it for lifetime. You don't have to do the course within 3 days. You just have to enroll within 3 days. The free link expires after 3 days. So go in there, get access to it, and then you'll always have further access to it. And by all means, share it. I mean, if you've got colleagues that missed this webinar or could use this course, you can share that link. It's unlimited enrollments. I'll always provide free access to my courses and my content through these webinars. And even if you don't go and do the course, even this recording or the discussion that we've had today, hope will be useful for you. So don't make the same mistake that I did, thinking that I could hack my way through referencing and get a PhD. It's just not possible. Maybe at a master's, but even for a master's, I would say get your referencing sorted out. The time that you spend on setting yourself up properly, using academic referencing as a system, and having the tools and the tips and the tricks like I teach you now, will save you hours and hours and hours and hours. And it'll be hours that are important, right? It'll be hours just before deadlines. It'll be hours in the middle of the night. Those are the important hours that you want to save when you're under pressure. Those are the hours that you need to be at your best when you're finalizing your argument and speaking in an academically confident voice in your writing, etc. Those are not the hours when you want to be spending hassling with PDFs and source material and wading your way through files on your PC, etc. Okay. Guys, Lionel, absolute pleasure. We'll see you in the Facebook group. Join up there, and that's where we continue our discussions and have a lot more fun. Guys, we're going to leave it there. It's 1 o'clock. I hope you all have a fantastic afternoon. It's been an absolute pleasure. Nomzamo, super helpful. Glad you enjoyed it. Glad it was useful. That's what we're all about here at the Student Success Coach community. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you in the Facebook group, and don't forget to subscribe down below to the YouTube channel. Cheers, guys.